Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at the Paris Air Show at Le Bourget, the historic airfield just outside the French capital. Our coverage here is sponsored by Bell and Leonardo DRS. It's an our honor to have with us Dr. Will Roper, who is the Assistant Secretary of the United States Air Force for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics. Sir, always a pleasure.
Vago, thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here at the air show. You can hear people clapping and the buzz. It's a big turnout this year, and that tells you something about the future of the aerospace industry.
Absolutely. It's very exciting. One of the largest delegations in U.S. delegations certainly here. Talk to us about what some of your priorities are. I know that you hit the ground running about 24 hours ago, and you haven't stopped since.
It's amazing what caffeine can do for you, Vago. Air shows, we have a myriad of objectives we're trying to hit. It's meeting with our allies and partners, making sure that our partnerships are secure and supported. We're trying to make sure that allies and partners and everyone else know the goods and services and platforms that we're bringing to bear in the U.S. And we're also here to see what's being built by foreign industry bases. So we're taking a look at what French companies are able to do across Europe. We want to make sure that we're current, look for partnerships where we can, and make sure that we keep our industry base in the U.S. As the leading in the world.
It just struck me that today was the unveiling, or at least an unveiling of a model of the SCAF, the Franco-German-Spanish fighter aircraft. The F-35 is rapidly becoming sort of a European standard jet, with the UK, Italy, and other nations, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, all being part of the program. Talk to us a little bit about, and Poland, of course, soon, as well, potentially, and Finland if they decide. A lot of potential customers on it. Tempest is the British program that's under development. As the world's largest air force, what are some of the keys to make sure that as these development programs go along, the U.S. role in it, how the U.S. assists, and how the U.S. benefits potentially from all of this activity?
Sure thing, Vago. One, the F-35 is doing great in its testing. We get amazing feedback from our operators. They love flying it. It's easy to fly. We're getting new pilots trained very quickly, which tells you something about the amount of touch that the aircraft needs in order to be able to fly it. Pilots are able to focus more on mission systems and warfighting, which is great. It's playing a great role as a quarterback on the battlefield, so it's not just doing well as a fifth-gen system standing alone. It's sharing data with fourth-gen systems, helping them up their game. All things that we had hoped for when the program was first moving into test, but we're now getting data that demonstrates. Now that said, as we start looking across Europe, we're getting more FMS cases, more potential FMS cases. That tells us that this feedback is being good publicity, good marketing for us as to what this system can do. But as we see other countries start talking about their next generation systems, their sixth generation systems, we should always welcome competition. Competition writ large is a good thing in the aerospace industry because we have our own ambitions for sixth gen systems, and we should always feel hungry that we've got people that are on our heels, and if we don't keep pushing the envelope, that others might. It also gives us a little bit of impetus to treat Block 4 as an important imperative for the Air Force and the Department as a whole. We're just moving into Block 4 modernization, bringing new capabilities on the jet, and it's important that we not drop the ball on it so that the F-35, as the world's premier fifth-generation fighter that's available today, always remains an appealing option for nations that are looking to get into the fifth-gen game.
And do you see opportunities also, though, to play a role perhaps on the Allied aircraft to ensure that kind of interoperability the alliance is always dependent on?
Absolutely. We've been having informal discussions with multiple nations about partnering either at the system or subsystem level, and I think that's going to be the rules of the road for the foreseeable future. We're not going to be completely competitive. We're not going to be completely in partnership. We're going to look for opportunities where they present themselves. But on the whole, competition's a good thing. If we lose it, we're going to lose our urgency. So urgency is what helped build the Air Force that we enjoy today. I hate the idea of losing urgency so we can't hand it off to the future.
I don't think anybody can accuse you of not being, attacking the jobs, whether you were at the Strategic Capabilities Office before this one or since you've been Acquisition Chief. Let's talk a little bit about culture and Boeing, and I want to then go into sort of acquisition culture and the change there. Boeing has, you've twice stopped delivery of the KC-46 Pegasus tanker, high priority program for the United States Air Force to recapitalize the tanker fleet for that first tranche, the X tranche of this three-phase modernization of the KC-135 Stratotanker force, also by Boeing. There have been loose tools, manufacturing debris. On top of it, there are some of the challenges the company has also experienced, for example, on 737 and some other programs that have management and production culture. For many veteran analysts in this business, folks recognize Boeing's a great company, but they're stunned that they're like, hey, look, this is just airplane delivery 101. From your standpoint, has any of this shaken your confidence in Boeing, and are you convinced the company is on the right track to address these challenges to deliver airplanes that don't constitute a potential safety of flight issue?
Well, first and foremost, I'm disappointed. Now, we should not be accepting tankers the way we're doing them today, sweeping the airplanes 2, 3, 4, 5 times to get all the foreign object debris off them. So I'm very disappointed. Now, as I look at Boeing, to their leadership, are they treating this seriously? Are they giving it management attention? Yes, they are. The processes that they have to do quality assurance are more than adequate. They are industry leading if they follow them. And to your point, Vago, you said the right word. You hit the nail on the head. This is a culture issue. Culture is what keeps airplanes clean. It's something we feel very personal about in the Air Force because foreign object debris is a big deal on the flight line. So if we have debris, we're not in a safe flying environment. If we don't know where a tool is, then we have to red X that aircraft and find it because it presents a safety risk to whoever is on that airplane. And what's great about the Air Force is no one feels that making that call and keeping the airplane on the ground is not the right call. We have a safety-focused culture, and the ethos of the organization backs it up. Well, we're now expecting Boeing to do the same thing. And we're not going to be able to do that with a memo either from us or a memo from them. This is something that takes time to do culture reform. So I'm satisfied that Boeing is addressing it, but the only way we're going to know if this culture is taking place is if we start seeing this foreign object debris travel up the line. We're starting to find it early and earlier at the point that it's created, and then if the total amount starts coming down, meaning that the quality assurance processes are being followed. And they'll be followed not because of process improvement itself, they'll be followed by reinstilling a quality assurance culture. So we're going to have to stand by and watch, be frustrated as we accept planes this way, and measure as we go to see if the change is taking place.
How long do you think that process is going to take?
Well, every airplane that's up at the Everett facility that was in flow when we found the foreign object debris and shut down the line, we would expect to have foreign object debris on it, and that's bearing out to be the case. So we have many more airplanes to get through before we should start seeing those first airplanes that are coming through from beginning to end as virgin aircraft in the new quality assurance regime. It's going to be months before we have that take place. So we're going to have a few more long hours inspecting before we get to something that would be a measurable change, and we hope we see it.
Overall, are you satisfied with the plane? There are always questions about center of gravity issues and things like that. Are we over those hurdles, and are you satisfied with where the jet is?
Well, other than the two deficiencies that we're correcting, we're very satisfied that once we've gotten the sweeping done, that we've got a good quality airplane. It's just not the way we want to do it.
Let me take you to broader culture change. You and I have talked about acquisition culture, but folks get focused on 804 reforms, that you can circumvent JCIDs or the 5,000 process changes. More importantly, how do you see the acquisition culture changing from top to bottom, from formulation of requirements? It took us a long time to get the culture, as you and I have discussed, that we have. And culture change takes process, it takes attention, it takes focus, it takes a sense of urgency. Because the United States Air Force has been able to do extraordinary things. We put man on the moon effectively, actually, in a little more than 6 years at the end of the day. The ballistic missile submarine program was 5 years. Where are we on the culture change? What are the changes that you're documenting and see that's positive, and where do we have to go next?
It's a really good question, Vago, and I think the next year or 2 years are going to really determine whether the culture change that I have seen at an amazing pace over the last year sticks or whether it's shocked back into old habits of going slow. So the way that we've been able to affect culture change in a really rapid, radical way is just using old lessons. We're not doing anything new in acquisition. We're just learning the old lessons that programs like the Apollo program or the F-117, Lockheed Martin Skunk Works programs knew, which was if you want to go fast, first you got to delegate decision authority. You're not going to go fast if your decisions have to go to the top of the bureaucracy where you get further and further away from the expertise that needs to make the decision. So that's lesson one. Lesson two, be temporally driven. So having to deliver something fast and on time as being more important than deliver something that is perfect later is a key catalyst for culture change. So the F-117 did not have everything that we would have wanted, but we still tout it as one of the great successes of that period of the Air Force. Well, the fact it needed to deliver something earlier rather than perfect later created a different kind of culture than one that's checking off every box of requirements. And three, one that you know I'm very passionate about coming over from the Strategic Capabilities Office, is prototype and fly before you buy. It might cost you a little more up front, but the unforgivable sin in acquisition is going into production with a flawed product so that you're not only trying to manage your production line and get it to be more efficient, you're trying to do that and also fix your product at the same time. And the programs that we have not done that and gotten a flawed product into production, well, we're living those now. They should be a cautionary tale for us. So Vago, I have seen amazing response from our acquisition enterprise. People feel empowered, they're making decisions, they believe it's okay to fail, they believe that we're doing this because there is a threat that is challenging us. We're not just going fast to go fast, we're going fast because future airmen need us to. It's doing amazing things. But I'm also seeing doubters in Washington that say, well, maybe this is too radical a change. And maybe we should try to couple this human-focused acquisition with process-focused. And my experience is you got to pick one or the other.
Let me ask a follow-up on this, and then one last question, because I know you've got to go. You've been very generous with your time. What are the demonstrable examples? You know, folks like to say, hey, we're making progress. Give us examples, concrete examples of where you're moving the ball down the field faster, or cheaper, or smarter.
Sure. I mean, take our hypersonics programs. We just started those programs a year ago. We just did our first successful captive carry test on the wing of a B-52. We normally wouldn't even be on contract yet, Vago. We're out doing things in the real world, learning in the real world, and the test was successful. So they're not things that we have to now go back and undo. We know that we got the design right, so we're now thinking forward, and our ambitions go up, and our excitement goes up. For programs like Next Generation Overhead Persistent Infrared, we're a year and a month into that program. We're through system requirement review and payload design reviews. Normally we'd be sitting around hoping to get contracts awarded. So there's no mystery in this. When you decide to go fast and you get industry as part of the team early on, you start learning early. It gives you more time to adapt to what you find. And if you happen to be lucky and you get your design right up front, you get the benefit of recouping that time. So I've got to feel that if we went back to the 1940s era Air Force and we got the Century Series people back up in our shops today, or pulled out the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, or any of our industry partners, Phantom, or any of those partners that have built something quickly, and we put them in Air Force program offices today, they would say, oh yeah, this is just normal. Going fast, being agile, pushing the envelope has got to be the new normal. The future is too uncertain, too threatening for us to be anything less than the world's most dominant Air Force. And if you look at what's been bequeathed to us over our 70 years, right, we've got the cultural identity to maintain it, but not if we pretend that a process is somehow going to be better than people at making choices that count for the future.
Let me ask you one last question, and that there are a whole series of major acquisitions that are mergers and acquisitions that are ongoing. L3 and Harris are merging. Full disclosure, L3 is one of our sponsors. Raytheon and United Technologies just announced their union. Full disclosure, Raytheon has sponsored with us in the past. One of the things that you've discussed is, you know, we don't know what the budgetary environment's going to be, and we'll have to make some hard choices. And at some point, we may have to decide that a lot of sacred cows may have to be killed in order to free resources for the future. The concern with some of these larger companies is not necessarily they create antitrust challenges, but fundamentally, they create corporate entities that have so much horsepower that they will be able to effectively push the customer around and be able to forestall certain decisions or impinge on investment. How do you view the consolidation of these companies and whether or not it actually constricts your strategic ability to compete at the end of the day?
So Vago, that's probably a 2-hour answer, but let me try to give you something that's easy to hold on to, and maybe we can discuss again at a subsequent air show. If you put a small picture frame around these transactions, I think they're good business. We don't get into the details of them, we stay impartial, but they're being done because the companies see a synergy that they need to be competitive in future. If you pull the picture frame back to look at the industry-based change as a whole since the early Air Force, I think it's been negative because it's collapsed from having 24 people who could build airplanes for us now down to just a few. Now, the reasons for that, I think, are pretty clear. We were still building things pretty frequently up into the 70s. But then as we moved into the Cold War, airplanes became more than airplanes. They became major technology maturators and demonstrators. The F-22 has 4 or 5 major technologies that it needed to be the dominant airplane it is today. And we still talk about what an awesome airplane it is, even though it's got a few years on it. That technology shift slowed down the pace of new programs and forced the industry base to collapse. Now think about the world we live in today. Technology is not just being built by the US government, it's being produced in commercial entities, universities, companies. So we don't have to wait on technology. Technology is coming to us if we choose to use it. So we've got to have some strategic foresight to change the pace at which we create new programs. And that means not building things to last 30 years anymore. Programs ought to have an IOC date, an initial operational capabilities date, and they also should have an expiration date, a date that we decide if we have not replaced it, that we're not staying competitive. So tools like digital engineering, modern software development will help add fuel to this fire. But if we continue with old practices, we should continue to expect the industry base to collapse more and more. And as we've already discussed in this interview, right, competition is a great thing in the aerospace industry.
And are you concerned that competition is going to dwindle, or do you think that that's something that can be managed, for example, through programs, new programs?
I think if we bring a true sense of strategy into our next generation programs in aviation and space, and are mindful about creating an update period that is in years, not decades, that it will provide more opportunities for the industry base to grow. We've talked a little bit with industry about the idea of returning to a Century Series style development, leveraging digital engineering as the centerpiece. We believe it's doable. We have no program today that's wrapped an acquisition strategy around a production technology. We tend to wrap acquisition strategies around warfighting technologies. So we've got a lot of thinking to do with our industry partners on how to get this right. But at a macro level, I would like industry to see more and more profit in design. But with as few and far between as programs are today, design is a loss for industry. Bid in so that you make that money back in production and sustainment. I can't imagine us staying a cutting-edge Air Force if profit is made in sustaining old things. We've got to give industry profit for building new things. And a lot of the heroes that we've seen today at the air show, a lot of the Apollo astronauts that I got to have lunch with today, which was amazing, right? They're here, they're heroes, because we did new things during their time. And I'd like to see us do that again.
That's right, because Walt Cunningham, Charlie Duke, and Al Worden were here, which is just extraordinary.
Got a photo with them on my phone that I will treasure forever. But when you talk with people like that, it demystifies the past. It was awesome, but it was normal for them. It was people, ordinary people, that became extraordinary because they aspired to the exceptional. And when you're only doing things every other decade, there's not a lot of opportunity for the exceptional. So it's time to create the opportunity again, Vago. So as we discuss at future air shows, I hope that you will see progress from us on figuring out the theory of how we shorten the lifespan of programs so that they happen more frequently. And if we do, there'll be more opportunities to find those exceptional people who will be at air shows in future.
Dr. Will Roper, the Assistant Secretary of the United States Air Force for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics. Always a pleasure. Thanks very much, and hope you have a terrific air show.
Thanks, Vago. You too.